Shabbat Shalom, my friends. January 27th is the official anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz by the Red Army in 1945. Therefore, January 27th has been established as a day of remembrance by the United Nations of the Holocaust that occurred in the year 2005. This annual event now is observed in many countries across the globe, including in Israel, because Yom HaShoah is the official Holocaust Remembrance Day, and that's associated with the Warsaw Ghetto late in spring. Israelis observe January 27th annually as a time to assess the status of anti-Semitism in the world. That's most fitting. With your permission, let's just take a few seconds in silence for silent reflection before we begin this week's study. Our Sedra is bow. Beginning with Exodus chapter 10, verse 1 and following, God commands Moses, bow el paro, go, or sometimes go before Pharaoh. Go before Pharaoh now with a clear intention. Pharaoh will not let the Israelites go free as the final 3 plagues in this Sedra assault Egypt. Because God wants to create a narrative that will live through the ages, a narrative that will capture the attention of children, a narrative that will enshrine freedom as a paramount virtue, a narrative that will give birth to what will become the Jewish people. So here they come. Locusts, darkness, the slaying of the firstborn. The Israelites will depart Egypt then and every year after that. A festival will be created in what the Torah calls the first month of the year, the month of Nisan. It will be a time of remembrance not only of the Exodus, but of the total 430 years that the Israelites spent in Egypt from the time that Jacob and his family moved there at the invitation of Joseph. Why? Ki b'chozek yad hotzianu Adonai miMitzrayim mibeit avadim, because God brought us out of the house of slavery, out of Egypt, with a mighty hand. Okay. Avivah Zorrnberg reflects on what at first appears to be a rather absurd scenario. Moses, as we know, goes to Pharaoh. Moses warns Pharaoh that his recalcitrance will result in yet another disastrous plague, and then another plague, and then another. But Pharaoh won't listen as this dead-end drama, this perverse cycle unfolds. It is not inappropriate to ask, why did God bother with such a step-by-step process that inevitably will lead to a predetermined conclusion? God, cut to the chase. You want the Israelites out? Fine. Then instead of 10 discrete plagues, why not just launch a single catastrophic event against Egypt and get the job over with? That's a reasonable question, right? But Zorrnberg reflects on the teachings of many rabbinic commentators who want us to understand that God was weaving 3 different narratives for 3 different audiences. First of all, future generations of Jews needed to be addressed. A grand story is unfolding here, matching the power of God with the self-proclaimed God of Egypt, that Pharaoh person. Sort of like Zeus and Kronos battling over control of the cosmos. God will emerge triumphant and then will turn to the Israelites in order to create an eternal covenant. The people, they were skeptical. The people were skeptical throughout the desert wandering. But they will see the impact of the plagues with their own eyes. Seeing here is comparable to what Zorrnberg would call inner clarity. They will acquire inner clarity. Okay, God is God, and the plagues, one after the other, were needed to drive that point home. That's one group. Then the masses of Egyptians needed to be addressed. We forget about them. They worshiped their leader and lived under his protection, but the sequence of disasters step by step might serve to shake their confidence in their Pharaoh. God wanted the Egyptians to turn away from cruelty, because Egyptians, in fact, all peoples, are a part of the divine order. They are capable of change despite their reluctance and resistance. We all are. God figured, if even a few of them would come to acknowledge God's singular greatness, perfect. Even a few of them. That's a net gain. Third audience. Finally, Pharaoh was being addressed. Oh boy, how easy it must have been to live in that palace. Your every need is attended to. Guards protect you from all harm and also keep you away from reality. You constantly receive lavish tribute from all of those whom you have enslaved or conquered. You are not only treated well and respectfully, but you are worshipped. Life in the palace. Who knows? Maybe after receiving the adulation of the masses as you ride in your royal chariot or sail the Nile in your royal yacht, you might actually come to believe that you really are God. But you aren't a God. And the task of convincing Pharaoh is complicated. It won't work with one big catastrophic event, but rather a series of devastating plagues hit, stop, hit, stop, hit, stop, as step by step, Pharaoh is being encouraged to re-enter the real world. Zorrnberg. The encounters between Moses and Pharaoh were nothing other than staged events. There was purpose. There was the artistry of theater, as one scene follows another and prepares for what comes next. Consider the drama. Oh, walking sticks become serpents. The eternally dependable Nile spews forth foul-smelling waters as it swarms with death. Great scene. Dust becomes lice. Night's darkness becomes tangible, impenetrable. Hail flashes with inner fire. Each scene, warning, resistance, yielding, refusal, over and over. Our commentators insist that Pharaoh is no stick figure. He has a voice. And the rabbis teach that Pharaoh is still trying to address us today. A never-ending drama. And his voice can never and will never, Pharaoh's voice will never be silenced. He mocks God, saying that, well, I have it right here, the ancient equivalent of a farmer's almanac, there's no listing for God, Adonai, not there, can't be found. He looks at the bloody Nile and proclaims that those who follow the God of Moses will themselves be forced to spill their own rivers of blood over the centuries. He laughs at the covenant. And he asks, what kind of a God is this? It took him so very long to figure out that you guys were enslaved and suffering and were miserable. Great God you got there, Moses. Pharaoh then scorns the very notion of redemption because despite ancient narratives, my friends, we are very far from being redeemed 2023. Very far. The narratives in our Sedra weren't intended for light reading. There is depth here, Sedra Bo. And there are warnings and promises and fear and trust. We read of the events in Egypt and we try to match them up to the 3,000 years of history that followed. It's a tough thing to match. It doesn't work easily. The pieces somehow never fit. But still, we keep trying. Somewhere, the keys to our future await us. So we will keep on sitting in the theater, participating in the show, and we will keep on trying to bring the promises of the Exodus into our own lives. Theater. You gotta love theater. Shabbat Shalom, my friends. And we'll see you next week.